Thank you, everyone. We're so excited that the Speaker of the House is on her way right now, and we will stop wherever we are for Madam Speaker when she arrives, and she'll have a very special introduction from Captain Jen Peace when that happens. In the meantime, though, we'll continue with our program, and I want to bring the three filmmakers to the stage, co-directors Gabriel Silverman and Fiona Dawson, and producer Jamie Coughlin.
Good evening, everyone. I am Fiona Dawson, co-director of TransMilitary, and this is the director, Gabe Silverman, and producer, Jamie Coughlin. We started this film to follow the fight for open transgender service in real time, and we had no idea how it was going to end. When the ban was lifted in 2016, we thought it was going to end on a fabulous wedding in Hawaii. But never would we have imagined that the hopes of our transgender service members would have been realized only to be crushed with some tweets. So as you just saw, after a year of careful study, the policies were changed, the ban was ended, and US transgender service members could serve openly for the first time. Policies were rolled out in order to treat them with the equal dignity and respect that they so deserve.
Then, a little over a year later, President Trump surprised his own Department of Defense, calling for a new ban. Shortly thereafter, on live television, each service chief was asked how many reported problems were there with transgender troops, and the answer was 0. Now, on April 12th, in a little over a week, this new ban is going to go into place. There will be 2 years, 9 months, 13 days since the government said to these trans troops, come out of the shadows, serve our country as you are, and we'll evaluate you, not based on your gender, but based on your service.
This isn't just about equality, it's about military readiness. In 2018, the Army missed its own recruiting goals by 20,000 people, even with the use of waivers that lowered behavioral, conduct, and health standards. So why are we jeopardizing the careers of thousands of active duty service members who are meeting and exceeding standards, and many of whom are already battle tested? This should not be a wedge issue. Our service members, both transgender and not, deserve better. With that, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for the evening who will lead our discussion. Please welcome Amna Nawaz, national correspondent and substitute anchor for the PBS NewsHour.
in the film there, Captain Peace. Come on up and join us, guys. Hi, Captain Cook. I didn't get to say hi before. How are you? Nice to meet you. Just really quickly, because I know this is not normal for you guys to sit up here in front of everyone and take questions like this, can we just have a warm round of applause to welcome them and thank them for sharing their stories? Which makes you more uncomfortable, I'm sure, right? So here's what we want to do. We're going to spend a little time up here. I have some questions of my own. I'm sure you do too. So I'm going to start it off. I want to kind of move things forward and remind everyone what exactly is at stake here and dig a little bit deeper about some of the things we just saw in that incredible film. So just to kick it off, I'm going to put some of the burden on you, Captain Peace. Can you bring us up to speed now? Let's pick up where this story left off. On April 12th, when the clock strikes 12 on April 11th and we go into April 12th, this ban goes into effect. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the thousands of other transgender service members?
Sure. So essentially what has happened is there were 4 lawsuits that were pending against the Trump administration over the ban. Once it got to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court lifted its injunction, all of the lower circuit courts were followed precedent. And so now the injunction is lifted. The Department of Defense has published a policy, and that will go into effect on April the 12th. So anyone who is currently serving and currently has a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and is transitioning can continue transitioning and fall under the old policy, essentially like nothing has changed. But if you are not out, you can no longer begin treatment. You can no longer come out as transgender. If you're enlisted, you can't become an officer. Anything that requires a sessions is no longer available. And if you have not joined the military, obviously you can no longer join the military. And it is a ban. The idea that it's not comes from saying, essentially what Don't Ask, Don't Tell was, you can be transgender as long as you don't tell anyone, you don't come out, you don't transition, you don't do anything trans-related at all. Technically, you can be transgender just like you could have been gay as long as no one ever found out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Well, and this is what we hear from military officials already defending it. They say it's not actually a ban. It doesn't really affect everyone. Captain Cook, tell me, how would it affect you on April 12th?
So, yeah, I will say, okay, we're good. Sorry, I'm short. Yeah, it's definitely a ban. So that means, for myself and all of the soldiers we have, for those of you, who don't know much about the military, it's a super small community, essentially, super close knit. And so when you have policy that essentially invalidates who you are, or says, you can be who you are as long as you don't talk about it, as long as you're not open about it, as long as you're not honest about it, and you have to work and serve with soldiers every day, but you can't be yourself, you can't talk to them about who you are, that's a huge deal. That's essentially saying, I can't maintain my integrity. And that's a cornerstone of leadership in the Army. You have to be a leader of character. You have to be someone who has integrity, and to have an overarching policy that denies me that integrity and denies me that humanity, and still expect me to go out there and lead soldiers honorably and truthfully. That doesn't work.
Let me ask both of you, would both of you consider, would you both want to stay in military service if the ban goes into effect? Is there any point at which you decide this is not something I want to do?
I mean, the ban is going to go into effect at this point. There's essentially nothing that can be done to prevent that. But leaving the military doesn't help. If you want the military to get better, you have to change it from the inside, and you have to be the kind of leader that you want to see in the military. So leaving it just gives the military back to the people that would discriminate against different classes, and that's not the right answer.
Captain Cook, anything you want to say to that?
I agree.
Well said.
That's all I'll say.
Well said. I think we're going to take a break right here. I believe you have some remarks to deliver to introduce our speaker. Yeah?
Now it's awkward just standing here. I don't want to just, and then you don't time it right, and then she's walking around. It's all right. All right, so I had more remarks planned, but I will keep this quick because I understand that Madam Speaker is in a bit of a hurry. But you should all know that the LGBT community has had no better ally since June of 1987, when on her very first day in office, Speaker Pelosi co-sponsored a non-discrimination bill for a Civil Rights Act amendment to prevent any sort of discrimination against lesbians and gays. In that same year, when 60% of the population did not believe that it should even be legal for gay people or same-sex relationships to be in a relationship, never mind marriage, she marched on Washington to support an LGBT rally. Please welcome Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Hello, hello, everyone. Good evening. By now, you know this is a working farm, and people have tasks. I know that Joe Kennedy is here with you in spirit, and hopefully he'll be able to get over here by the time the markup ends. But he has been a real leader and forming the Transgender Caucus Task Force, and then being having the legislation on the floor last week. It was so important. He's always been about equality, fairness, and dignity. Thank you for your very kind words of welcome. It is for me, people say of me, oh, it's easy for you. You're from San Francisco. People are so tolerant there. I said, well, it is easy for me, but don't use the word tolerant around me because it's a very condescending word to me. It's not about tolerance. It's about respect. It's about taking pride. And we take in pride in Captain Jennifer Peace. Thank you so much for your courage. Captain Peace was one of my transgender guests at the State of the Union address. We were all in tears after the speech because it just didn't show respect. And the fact is that our transgender members of the military, they participate in a higher number with great courage, great dignity, and respect by other members of the military. The ban, we thought we were rid of all that stuff during the Obama administration under the leadership of President Obama. The ban is an act of cruelty. But you know all of that. What I do want to though is thank all of you and thank Captain Peace for this. I heard someone say yesterday, nothing conveys information more than telling your story. And you can talk about statistics and history, but telling your story. And it takes real courage and generosity of spirit to tell your story. And your story has the power, the eloquence, to reach people in their hearts and to also change their minds. And that's a beautiful, patriotic service to our country in so many ways. I get on the emotional side when it comes to this because it's some of the same people who are participating in the acts of cruelness pass themselves off as very religious people. And you're like, how could you be a religious person who has a person of faith, who believes in God and that we're all God's children, and there's a spark of divinity in each and every one of us, and yet, and I'll just tell you something, Colonel Peace, forgive me, Captain Peace, it's so self-serving. When we were doing the hate crimes legislation under the leadership of Barney Frank, when he was here, and Matthew Shepard's mom, and all of that, we were having some little challenges. And so they came to me and they said, you could get this passed. I told you it was self-serving. I put up that sign, right? You can get this passed in 1 minute if you take out transgender as a hate crimes bill. I said, why would you even say that to me? We're not passing it in 100 million years if transgender isn't in there. That's the important, probably the most important part, the most vulnerable now community that we are addressing. And our members really came through. Matthew Shepard's mother, the sheriff from Laramie County came and said, you know, the people that you worry about, who law enforcement, that's who I am, but this story changed my mind, and I'm going around the country telling Matthew's story. So thank you again. Because stories, they just rule. And again, as much as we can document and give the statistics and all the rest, nothing is more authentic, is more convincing, more eloquent, more persuasive, stronger than you, Captain Peace. Thank you so much for allowing me to come say some words to you. And thank you all. Thank you all very much. These people are going to be relics in the dustbin of history. They just don't know it. So our deal is, to us, it is inconceivable. To them, it is inconceivable. To us, it is inevitable. So we have to shorten the distance between the inconceivable to some and the inevitable to us. Thank you for shortening that distance. Thank you, Captain Peace. Joe Kennedy one more time. Just wonderful, and this is a priority for him. We're so proud of him. Thank you again.
Picking up where we left off.
Hold on one second. I spent all day at work crafting. They said you have 1 minute, and so I spent all day shortening this thing down to about a minute and 15 seconds, and I thought it was perfect. And then right before she walked in, they said she's in a big hurry. Everyone knows who she is. You have 5 seconds. So that.
Hold up. Did you just edit that real time?
Yeah, that was. I mean, I just said the first thing that I remembered because my daughter was tearing up my speech anyway. So if you ever want to feel more humble and less important, my 6-year-old was watching a Disney movie that whole time on my phone. So. Sorry, go ahead.
This is some serious broadcast skills, though. Editing in real time like that. Oh, I see. Okay.
That is my mentor, Sue Fulton, who has probably done more than almost anyone else in this room.
So allow me, I want to pick up where Speaker Pelosi left off. And I'm sorry, I am remiss. Colonel Rasmussen, I'm going to give you a chance here. Please do introduce yourself. You mentioned you have not been out speaking on this issue in particular, but you came here for a reason today. Please tell everybody what that is.
I came here because I want to support Jen. Jen's my XO. Mm-hmm. It's important to me because I'm also supporting the Army, because the Army needs strong leaders. Jen is a strong leader. I can tell from the movie you're a strong leader as well. And I cannot fathom the fact that somebody would try to take someone like Captain Peace and put her out of the Army. I want to deploy. I want to serve with the best soldiers that I can, and Jen is that. So that's why I've chosen to be here.
So just to pick up on the earlier conversation we were having then, when the ban goes into effect, what are you, as someone in your position, most concerned about?
Wow, that's a good question. So that's not something that I personally ever have to concern myself with every day, except knowing Jen. I think the thing I'm going to be most concerned about is that there are, the Army's a big organization, 500,000 people on active duty. My concern is that there will be people on active duty that think that that is a license to be able to harass my soldiers. And that is not acceptable. That is not anything that we do. You heard the generals talk about us treating people with respect. So I'm going to continue to enforce that everybody treats everybody with respect. I would hope that's what all my peers and my counterparts do. So,
very well said. Picking up where Speaker Pelosi left off, though, and Captain Cook, I'm going to start with you. The power of your story, you can't know it until you speak it, right? You can't know how people will react until it's all out there. And I'm curious how you processed that decision, because it's one thing to go lobby people privately, right, to know and kind of keep your story to yourself and tell people you trust. It's another to have cameras following you everywhere you go. And with any great civil rights movement, right, there's always those people on the front lines. You guys are those people. So at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do this?
Yeah, so I am the anti-Jen, right? Jen is like great in front of the camera and with people, and I'm like, please don't talk to me, go away. But so with every great civil rights movement, there are those people on the front lines, and I am so grateful for them. And it took someone saying to me, the next generation of trans folks deserve their own people on the front lines. Are you going to just stand behind them, right, and not let it be you, right? And I thought about my soldiers, soldiers I have, people I know who don't necessarily have those people that are willing to put it all on the front line. And I just thought I owed it to the people who've done it for me. And that next generation that deserves to have the same opportunities that I did, to have someone that'll stand up for them. So and Fiona's very convincing.
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. I think Elle doesn't give himself enough credit for all the great work he's done. But you can't look at other people and say, you go fight this fight for me. You have to get out there and do it yourself. I spoke with Stuart Milk over the weekend. If you don't know him, he's Harvey Milk's nephew. And Harvey Milk's message was everyone has to come out and tell their story, because it's the only way you change anything is if people realize that trans people are their neighbors, their coworkers, their friends, their family. Nothing will change until you personalize the issue. And if I'm going to go out there, as I do, I get kind of scolded by Sparta because people say I'm not comfortable with coming out. How do I come out to my family? I don't want to come out. I'm going to wait. I tell them, no, you don't get that choice anymore. It is too important, because silence for the trans community is death. And that is what we are facing. And it is selfish to say, you go fight this battle. I'm going to wait until it's comfortable. It's never been my attitude as a soldier, and it's certainly not going to be any different with this.
It is. At the same time, it's an undeniable fact that there's a disproportionate amount of violence against trans Americans, right? Are either of you worried about that? Are you worried about facing discrimination or violence because everyone now knows who you are?
I am not, personally, and not because it doesn't exist, because like Jen said, this is what we do every day as soldiers, right? And it was like for me, I didn't go back to school to be an officer until, much later than the rest of my peer groups, right? And I'm worried. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be so old. It's going to be like all these young high school grads, and I can't compete. And, this chaplain said, I went to seminary when I was 40 years old. And my grandmother told him, my grandmother said, hey, you can either be 40 years old with a degree or 40 years old without a degree. You decide. Either way, you're going to be 40, right? And so for me, either way, I'm going to be a black trans guy in America, right? So I can confront that head on and do the work that needs to be done, right? Or I can be very passive and worry about this violence that will still exist whether I do the work or I don't. So like Jen said, that's not who we are as soldiers. If there's work that needs to be done, we have to go do it. So if that violence is going to exist, I want to make sure it's me that's confronting it every day, and that's making it safer for my trans brothers and sisters out there who have to experience, who might experience it.
I'm going to ask one more procedural question now. We saw the 4 lawsuits, right, the challenges to the ban. Can you update us on where those stand? Is there anything that could stop the ban from going into effect on April 12th? Or what is the next step now in the challenge?
Sure. There's really no chance that the ban is not going to be implemented on the 12th. At this point, really the only things that could end the ban would be the unlikely event that legislation is passed by the House, the Senate, and then signed into law by the President, or is able to be a veto overridden. And I don't think that's likely over the next 2 years. So unfortunately, I think what we're going to go into is a period over the next really 2 years where we have no openly serving trans members coming into the military or coming out on active service. And there may be a legislative way to get that through, but I'm generally the pessimist, so I don't think that's going to happen.
What is that like for you, though? Captain Cook, kick me off here. We saw in that moment in the film there all that fight, all that momentum it took to move things that had been that way for so long, to find yourselves where you are now. What is that moment like?
It's beyond deflating. It's beyond deflating. If I have the chance, what I will say, so, Colonel Rasmussen being here as a leader is huge for me, right? Like, because this is the kind of leader that we want in our Army. This is the kind of person that I want to work for. So the one thing that I'll say while I have this chance is this is not singularly a trans issue, right? It's not singularly an LGBT issue. For me, I'm a personnelist in the Army, right? I deal with readiness every day, right? Ensuring, lower level units that our soldiers are ready to fight, go anywhere, fight, deploy, win at a moment's notice. And so if you look at this as a trans issue, as an LGBT issue, we're losing. As an Army, if we say as a nation that we want an Army that attracts the right kind of talent, and we want to manage that kind of talent to have a lethal, ready fighting force, right? Where we don't have sexual assault that's rampant, where we don't have hate crime issues that are rampant. If that's the kind of Army that we want, then you want an army that, understands that these basic kind of, human rights issues right here are non-issues. That we want the best talent, no matter who they are. That we want leaders who recognize that talent and will employ that talent effectively and efficiently. And that we don't want things like this to become a distraction from what we're really here to do, right? And so I'm sorry, I know that really doesn't get after your question, but I just wanted to take this moment to say, I didn't want to focus on this as just being a trans issue, and I want all of you guys to realize, you hear people say, we don't want the Army to be a social experiment. Like, no, it always has been, right? And it's because we do them and we're good at them. Because the Army might be the only, especially in the light of recent scandals, right? The Army might be one of the few meritocracies we really have, where you can take people from any background and say, all we care about is how you perform, period. And that's what we do. And you see, people like, Captain Peace and myself who've been enlisted. We've made it, our evaluations reflect, the kind of officers we've been. And I think that's, that's really important to look at that and understand who trans people are and what they bring to the fight. So I'm sorry. I know that wasn't your question.
It was better. We took it in a much better direction. I thank you for that.
I'm sorry.
To that point, look, you led me down a whole other path. It was wonderful. Colonel, speak to me about that. When you talk to your peers, people who may support the ban, what language do you use? How do you make the case to other leadership in the military that this is a bad idea?
Well, that's an interesting question. So for me, this is not about... I agree. This is not a trans issue. This is a human issue. This is a readiness issue. This is about people. It's not about putting more labels on anybody other than that. These are soldiers, right? We show up to work every day. I want you there on time. I want you in the right uniform, right place, and you have to be ready to go to work. And they are. Nothing else matters. So when I talk to other people, and they talk to me about Captain Peace, because there are a few people who know Captain Peace, I think maybe more than a few, what her situation is at work. They kind of look at me, and I got this probably 2 days ago from someone who kind of gave me a look, and it's like, I don't understand. And I'm like, she's the best captain that I have worked with in the last decade. And I mean that. She is. I wouldn't, if I were to deploy, she'd be the first one I'd pick up. And I'm sorry, because I know your family wouldn't want to hear that, but you'd be the one I'd take with you. Our job, our mission, is to create a lethal army that can fight and win the nation's wars. And I take soldiers to do that. I take effective soldiers to do that. So it's not a trans issue. It's a readiness issue. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they've got a fighting spirit in there. And that's exactly what we want. That's why Jen is as good as she is. That's why Captain Cook is as good as he is, right? That's what we want. And so when I talk to my peers and I chat with them, I don't talk about, I don't know how to talk about trans other than just to say that she's a great officer. She's just a person. So I'll leave it right there.
So before we open it up to the room, one last question for both you, Captain Peace and Captain Cook, which is to say you guys spend a lot of time having to advocate, right? And you have to talk to people to convince them of something which should be obvious. And I wanted to give you both the chance right now, instead of feeling you have to speak to people to make a case or advocate, take a second and talk to the people who have always loved you, to the people who never had to be convinced, to some of the people who are right here in this room. Because I don't know if you get enough of a chance to be able to say whatever it is you need to say to them. So if you want, take a moment.
Yeah. Debbie, you want to stand up for a second? I know you don't, but this is my wife Deborah here and my three kids, Alex, Autumn, and Amelia. We've been together now almost 15 years, and there was never a moment through my transition, through multiple deployments, through anything, that I think I ever really questioned that we were going to be together again. And I know from experience that a lot of people have not had that kind of relationship. So thank you so much for your love and support over the last decade and a half of our lives. And there's other people in this room as well. Sue is trying to hide in the back. People like Blake, the president of Sparta, who's trying to hide in the back there, and all the great work he's done. And even, Fiona, Gabe, and Jamie. Gabe and Jamie and Fiona all started out as people who were making a film, and they were documentarians, and they were coming just to do the filming and move on. And I've done a lot of print and a lot of television, different media, and I felt like they were the first people who showed up not to tell the story they wanted to tell, but to tell our story. And that's been amazing. We've developed an incredible friendship, I think, over the years. So thank you for telling our story. That really means a lot.
Everyone that Jen just named, it's funny when you say that, because I feel that I haven't done a lot of advocating on my behalf. The people who I love most have done the advocating on my behalf. When I didn't even think, like I talk about my mom, you see Reverend Cook up there, and she is my biggest advocate. Gabe and Jamie and Fiona have been, my biggest advocates. So I feel like I have done no work. They have done all the work. Sue Fulton is, I didn't even have language for it. I went and found Sue Fulton. I was still at West Point. I was like, hey, do you know anybody that might know about these kind of people right here that you could put me in touch with to talk to? That was like the beginning of my introduction to Sparta. And I see Bryn Tanhill like hiding back there. Bryn was one of the first people as well. So this room is actually full of the people who I love the most, who've shown the most love to me, and who have done all the work. They've just simply, put me in places to tell my story. And that story has been, I joked last time, we were together. I said, people oftentimes want me to play oppression politics and, or oppression Olympics and tell them how hard my life is. And my story of advocacy has been that I have been surrounded by people who have loved me relentlessly and enabled me to just live my life. Just trans people are so boring. We are, right? Like, I love my mom and my daddy. They make me go to church. I love my baby, love my family. I'm just surrounded by people who have loved me so hard. And that's been what I've been able to go give to everyone that I've met. So, to everyone in this room who supported me, to you all, people I don't even know, right, who give us this kind of support. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
And Bryn is about to make the most important transition of all, not gender, but from the Navy to the Army. Ooh. So congratulations on that.
Ooh. Yes! Blue to green.
All right, I'm going to interrupt us once again. I apologize. We just go with the flow on Capitol Hill. And I want to welcome to the room one of our great friends from the LGBTQ community, the Honorable Congressman Joe Kennedy. Oh.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm hours late. I've been in a markup since about 9:30 or so this morning, and it looks like we're going all night into tomorrow. So believe me when I say I'm really glad to be here with all of you. We are in the midst of rolling votes, so I unfortunately have to get back right now. But I wanted to come by and say, first off, thank you for being here. Two, thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for always raising your voices to push our country forward as part of a long legacy and a long journey to make sure that we make good on the fundamental promise in our nation that everybody counts. To Fiona and Gabe, your ability to tell this story and keep the focus on those who are serving, on those who have stepped forward that ask for nothing other than a chance to make a sacrifice and a commitment to our nation. and that a nation should be nothing but grateful for their willingness to serve. I'm honored to play a small role in elevating those voices. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do each and every day to keep demanding more of our nation. And I'm just grateful for all of you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
It's actually worked out pretty well. We've got nice transition points with like surprise speakers coming. Like, who's going to walk through the door next, right? If you guys want, if you out there have any questions, we could open up to the room now. I've got tons more, but this is kind of a good break point for us. Anyone out there want to ask anything of folks up here? Yes.
Many in the room might know you usually were one of the first openly trans members of the military to testify before Congress. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that experience was like, but also if you had any reactions to the members of the Trump administration who testified after you, who said some rather unpleasant things to try to justify the ban.
Yeah, I've got a lot of reactions. So if you watch the testimony, my opening statement, I may have come across as a bit angry, and that's because about 20 minutes before the testimony started in the green room, I walked up to a gentleman and introduced myself. I didn't realize who he was. It was the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Manning, James Stewart. I didn't know who he was. I said my hellos, and we shook hands, and I asked if he was there for the Department of Defense, and he said he was. And so I physically turned away from him. I had lost interest in speaking with him that day. Myself and Captain Olivia Stellick were standing there, and he looked over at us, and he said, "This should be fun today." And the reason that I brought up that we weren't wearing uniforms and that Vice Admiral Bono was is because in my mind at that point, and I think accurately so, he was representing the interests of the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense's official position, according to the Undersecretary of Defense for Manning and Personnel Readiness, is now that testifying before Congress with the intent to discharge 15,000 service members to him is fun. That's their description. And so I was pretty angry going into that, and the testimony, I think, that was terrible with these 5-minute conversations where you feel like you can never really have a discussion. And then I listened to the testimony of Vice Admiral Bono and Mr. Stewart after that. I think it was accurately reported that, unfortunately, they were very misleading in their testimony. And I think that not advocating from a position of a political position about what I think about their testimony or how I feel about it, I think it is accurate to say that their testimony was misleading and inaccurate. And you could see them, I think, running out of positions to go to. Initially, the cost of trans service members and the care was brought up. You saw in the film was estimated to be $8 million a year. It actually turned out to be closer to $2.5 million a year, so $8 million over 3 years. The cost of Viagra over that same period was $140 million, and the cost to our Army band was over $1 billion. Then they talk about readiness, and we know that all 5 of the service chiefs have come out and said that this has no readiness on morale, impact, or anything else. And then they went to the readiness issue, and they inaccurately described how long a trans person is non-deployable for, saying it was in excess of a year and that it was different than most service members, which is completely inaccurate. The average trans service member is non-deployable for around 4 months compared to a pregnancy, which is closer to 16. And they also revealed that they're inaccurately counting their healthcare visits because they require you to see a healthcare provider to receive trans care, and then they say that trans people are receiving more mental health visits than anyone else. So they're creating their own arguments. And they also started counting if you go to a support group, because often the behavioral health hosts the support group in their space. So they were counting that as a mental health visit. So as you listen to them, you just realize it's unfortunate, really, that the basis for this policy can only end in discrimination. All the other arguments, I think, during that testimony really washed away. There just wasn't anything left. And that was almost disheartening because some part of you sort of hopes that there is a basis for this policy, that their interest really is in protecting national security and providing for the common defense. But that testimony, I think, finally showed that there just isn't anything there except discrimination.
If she could drop the mic, she would. It's stuck on the table. And any other questions out there? Obviously, we've got a lot of information up here.
You have to hurry. I think Vice President Pence is visiting in a few minutes to speak, so you might want to get in while you can. If no one's going to ask questions, I can talk all night.
My father served in the Army, and I went to Texas A&M University where a bunch of cadets ended up going out to serve. And so I was engaged in activism out there. And one question that always came back to me is something that I ask every single person that I can, also engaged in activism for their individual spaces. Where do you get your energy from at the beginning of each day? And then what do you do with your excess energy at the end of that day?
Oh,
no, this one's quick for me. I get my energy from being angry all the time. And then and monsters. And then all my energy at the end of the day goes to these 3 children here and the 150 plus pounds of dogs that I have at home demanding attention.
Yeah, so like everyone else in the Army, coffee. At the end of the day, right? A pot, at least. Start off with a pot of coffee. And at the end of the day, I don't know. For me, it's God all day, right? I'm out there trying to do good work, love on people, period. That's it. I think God renews me every day to just keep fighting a good fight.
Was so much more thoughtful than mine. Wow.
Coffee and God. It's pretty simple.
Okay, if anyone else has questions, feel free to raise your hand. But I'm going to... Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead. I was going to go through mine. Oh.
Go for it. I just, first of all, want to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for coming here. It's exhausting to watch that film. Absolutely a gay person. And, no, as trans friends, and I just... My question is basically, what advice would you give young activists to keep the fight
going? So the question is, what this fight's getting exhausted. What advice would we give to young advocates? I think the bottom line is you have to be open and you have to be vocal. You can't ever shy away because you're afraid of the consequences. That's what people who want to discriminate against you, that's what people who want to oppress you want to create, is fear of the consequences of speaking out. Everyone who we try to get, you see a lot of the same faces in the media. There's a reason for that. We try to get new people, and they're afraid of what their command is going to think or what the Army is going to think. And I certainly welcome every single member of the Department of Defense to listen and read every single statement that I have made and to judge me based on that and my actions. And I think that too often there's a culture of fear that is generated both from the violence against trans people and from the discrimination that comes to trans people and makes them hide in the closet, makes them not come out because of that fear. And you've just, Harvey Milk, and not to keep bringing him up, said, if a bullet enters my brain, let it break down every closet door in America. And it did. He was killed for advocating for gay rights in San Francisco, of all places. If he can do that, then we have nothing to be afraid of, and you've got to come out and share your stories, no matter who you are.
My advice, really quickly, my advice would be activism through conservation of energy. And that means, right? That means that you can be an activist and an advocate in your everyday living, right? That if you never march again, if you don't go breaking down doors, through the people that you meet and interact with every day, right? That you're a good person, that when you hear people say ignorant things, from your parents to like just your casual friends on Facebook or social media, to your coworkers, to people you're passing on the street, you check them when they're ignorant about, trans people or the LGBT community, that you let them know, right, that they're wrong or that they don't know a thing, or you inform them, right? So just, you don't have to march every day. Like, I appreciate it when you do it. But there's also activism when people go, I don't even remember what Caitlyn Jenner's name used to be, right? But when they call her by her dead name, right, it's simple, like, that's not her name. And then you just, right, and they're like, what? Like, you checking them is like, how dare you check me in my bigotry? Like, I was comfortable here, right? But that has ripple effects that you don't even know. So everyday activism in your living is the advice I would give to you.
That was a great question. Oh, now all the questions come. How about right down? Nick.
I just wanted to say, I'm going to start crying. I'm the mother of a gay son, and he has lots of friends who are trans. And I'm going to start crying because they're 16, and they're just finding their way. And I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing to hopefully make their journey easier in the future. So thank you.
Rasmussen, I think you've shown by being here and also your support that you exemplify the Army value of respect. And what would you say to people who might argue that a straight white cis man, and I'm making some assumptions about you, straight white cis man would have a hard time seeing people who are other as as equal and as deserving of that respect? How would you respond to that? And then my follow-up question is, do you find Captain Peace as exhausting as I found it?
That's a great question. Let me start with
She's from West Point. You don't have to talk to her.
So I learned... Yeah, I don't usually need microphones. I could fill this room with my voice. Let me take the second one first. Captain Peace can be exhausting, but I find her energy to be something I feed off of, because I tend to go to work and my wife knows that I am a little bit high energy. So able to direct Captain Peace's energy in the right direction, I think, is a good thing. I think we worked well together. So what do I say to other people who look like me, who probably would I could walk past them on the street and they'd be like, no big deal, that guy's just like me. Wow. So let me tell you a story about myself, right? So I grew up non-Mormon in the state of Utah, so I know what it's like to be discriminated against. And you all laugh, but it's true. If I were to wear a cross, everybody knew I wasn't Mormon, and trust me, there was a lot of discrimination. So what I discovered was I could take that off. I could pretend like I wasn't something else. Color of my skin is very clear. Yours isn't. I could take that cross off. But I learned that every single day, I am not going to treat other people the way that I was treated. I'm going to treat people fairly. I'm going to treat them with respect. And through my own example, I'm going to show other people how to act. I will say that I have run into many people who, I don't know, something about the last 2 years, but there's a great deal of disrespect being shown to people out there. And every single day I confront that, just like you said. You confront it. That is absolutely not who I am. I'm a centrist. I try to be apolitical in what I'm doing. I try to treat people with respect. And I do that every single day. And I'm willing to call out my peers or people who may think they're my peers and point them in the right direction.
Okay, I think we have time for one more, and I saw a hand waving in the back there. Yes, go ahead.
Hi all, thank you so much for being here today. I do a lot of work in healthcare advocacy, largely because as a queer woman, I've been denied healthcare so many times. And so what I find really interesting is that their sticking point is on healthcare. And that it's almost like they're using healthcare to kind of determine who's of value and who's not. And so I'm just curious as to your thoughts about this, about how they just keep drilling down on the healthcare issue, which there's such a long history of LGBTQ folks being marginalized, and their sticking point is healthcare. We saw that in the 80s with the AIDS crisis. We see that when it comes to the awful healthcare outcomes for queer women, and even with trans people not having access to the full range of services that they need.
I'll keep my answer short. It's where bigots retreat when they're out of good ideas. And that's all they have left. There's no science behind it. There's nothing behind it. They don't understand it. And it's where I think people go to create an argument that otherwise doesn't exist. The evidence is out there from the AMA, the APA, psychiatric and psychological associations have both come out and said that trans people, there's absolutely no reason they shouldn't be able to join the military. No actual medical experts agree with them. It's Dr. Oz and people like that out there. So it's just an argument that they retreat to when they're out of better ideas.
Yeah, Jen's absolutely right. And again, what I do in the Army is readiness, right? And if I can just give you a personal picture of this. So one, we know it's all lies, but I got in an accident this last deployment to Iraq, and got my whole mouth messed up, bottom teeth knocked out. And you'll see in that where I come back and I'm on leave or whatever, growing my good leave beard out, my hair is cut, and I have this bit of a lisp. And that's because I had this device in my mouth that the Army was trying to give me teeth temporarily until they can do all these surgeries. And so I had to go to the Air Force, the specialist in the Air Force to get it done, and had to go see a few civilian doctors. Anyway, they essentially told me that the care just to fix my teeth, right, was over $150,000. Or $150,000. I was non-deployable for the longest time until I could get these surgeries to fix my jaw, to fix my teeth, to get back in the game. My trans-related healthcare, right, one, I was paying out of pocket, but once the Army, started taking over, right, we're talking about the discounted generic brand, $20 worth of meds a month. And I took a good 30 days of con leave for the medical procedures that I had, right? That's how long I was gone. And I came back, I was like, oh, I can't do PT for a while. They were like, that's fine. We need you doing this work. You can do PT in 2 weeks. That was the extent. So if that just kind of paints a picture, sorry, PT is, physical training, so working out. So that just kind of paint a picture of, how distorted we view healthcare when it comes to trans folks. And I hate the pregnancy comparisons, and I hate the Viagra comparisons, because the bottom line for me is we should treat pregnant soldiers with the same amount of respect. It doesn't matter how much time they have to take off. They should get the same amount of respect. And we should take people who have to take ED medicines, or any other, of our soldiers who take anxiety meds or depression meds or whatever the case is, right? They should all get the same standard of care. And so to single out trans soldiers and say, well, you especially need care, right? Okay, provide it. But one, we don't. But any soldier who needs care, it should be provided for them, is the bottom line. So just know, it's a lie. We're not non-deployable for extended periods of time. We're not a burden of cost. I think the huge burden of cost is the stigma that we have in the Army that, prevents soldiers from seeking the treatment that they need. And we see huge rates of suicide. We see, these issues pop up in their families. We see abuse in families. Those are the huge costs that we have when we have these kind of stigmas in the Army about care. So sorry that was long.
Is there something else you'd like to say or no? Okay. I think we're going to get kicked out of the space soon, and I don't think there are any more surprise guests coming through the door tonight, but I'd love to be proved wrong. I just wanted to say, from my perspective as a journalist, I've always seen my role as elevating the stories that need attention, right? Shining a light on the issues of consequence, and to echo a lot of what we've heard up here, how we treat each other and how we see each other is an issue of consequence that has somehow come up for debate these days. So I am grateful because I can't do my job without people who are willing to share their stories. It seems like a small thing, but it is an enormous act of courage and bravery to do that. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone up here for coming up and sharing your truth and your story, because it allows me to do my work. So please join me in thanking our panelists, in thanking their families for being here as well. Of course, the filmmakers, Gabe and Jamie and Fiona, for bringing the story to us in the first place, and the folks at GLAAD for bringing us all together. Thank you all.
I told Amna I wasn't going to do this, but I am going to say one more thing, which is if you'd like to watch this film or share it with others, you can go to transmilitary.org and see all of the places it's available. It's running on Logo at logo.com, as well as available on iTunes, Amazon, and other streaming services. So please watch this film again. It's that good. And share it with your friends and contacts, and send it to an elected official if you've got their email address. We sent copies to the Supreme Court and to every member of Congress, so no one has any excuse for not watching this. Thank you and good night.